Welcome back to Finance Buzz Friday. Let's dive into something pretty important for the UK's financial services industry.
Okay, sounds good.
We're talking about the FCA's, the Financial Conduct Authority,
Right.
plan to make the UK more competitive globally.
Yeah.
But there's a twist.
Oh.
It's not just about getting rid of all the regulations. It's more like smart regulation that actually, helps growth.
Smart regulation. I like that. Yeah, we're looking at some pretty interesting stuff that you sent over. A parliamentary committee hearing where, they basically grilled the FCA about their plans.
Oh, wow.
And a letter straight from the FCA's chief executive to the prime minister.
Straight to the top.
Yeah, so these are some high-level discussions we're dealing with here, and they're really all about how to balance,
Right.
boosting growth,
Yeah.
but also, making sure consumers are protected.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, one of the things that really jumps out from all this is this whole thing about motor finance commissions.
Oh, yeah, that's a hot topic right now.
The Court of Appeal just kind of dropped a bomb,
Yeah.
saying that car dealers might actually have to disclose those commissions way more than the FCA rules say right now.
Yeah, it's all about this concept of a fiduciary relationship.
Fiduciary.
Yeah. Basically, it means there's a special level of trust and obligation involved.
Right.
So the court is saying, look, when a dealer is advising you on financing, they're not just selling you a car.
Right.
They're kind of acting like an advisor in a way.
Oh, interesting.
And that means, they got to be more transparent about how they're profiting.
So even if a dealer gets a bigger cut from pushing a certain loan, they'd have to tell you about it.
Uh-huh.
Even if the FCA rules didn't say that before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And this could be huge for financial firms, way beyond just car dealerships. Think about it. Mortgage brokers, financial advisors, anyone who gives you advice along with the financial product.
Yeah.
This could affect them all.
So this case could set a precedent that forces everyone to be way more transparent?
Yeah, it definitely has that potential.
Wow.
Right now, the FCA is hitting pause on complaints about those old commissions.
Oh, okay.
While this whole thing gets sorted out in the Supreme Court.
Makes sense.
But everyone's watching this very, very closely to see how far this duty to disclose goes.
Okay, wow. So so while we're talking about the FCA and how they make rules,
Yeah.
you mentioned this other thing about cost-benefit analyses.
Oh, the CBAs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and apparently there's a whole panel of experts saying the FCA just isn't doing enough of them.
Well, by law, they have to do CBAs for new rules, right, to see what impact they'll have.
Right.
But this panel's saying they should be going further.
Like how?
They want the FCA to do CBAs even for guidance they issue.
Oh, okay.
Which isn't legally binding, but still, influences how firms operate.
Right, yeah.
And they're also pushing for the FCA to think about the impact of all its regulations together, not just each one on its own.
Oh, so do they all actually work together?
Yeah, exactly. It's do they all fit together to achieve what they're supposed to?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And this is especially important right now, with the government pushing for deregulation to boost growth.
Yeah.
Because, in that rush to cut red tape, sometimes we miss things like unintended consequences, or conflicts between different rules.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's you need a speedometer and a map, right?
Right.
You can't just hit the gas without knowing where you're going.
Exactly. Okay, so moving on from how the FCA makes rules to what they're actually trying to achieve.
Okay.
There's this interesting point you brought up about how the financial industry defines investment.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the same as what economists or policymakers think of, right?
Yeah, a lot of financial firms see investment as any spending they do, even if it's just buying something that already exists rather than creating something new. So, if a company buys an office building, they might call that an investment,
Right.
but it's not necessarily creating new jobs or anything like that,
But from what I'm seeing in these sources, the FCI seems to be focused on what they call real investment.
Real investment, yeah.
The kind that actually leads to new businesses, jobs, infrastructure, that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
Things that actually boost the UK's, the whole economy, really.
Yeah, they want to see new things happening,
New stuff.
New companies, new projects, new ideas.
Right.
Not just, moving money around.
And they've even talked about some pretty radical ideas to make this happen, right?
Yeah, like giving startups kind of a learner's permit.
A learner's permit.
Yeah, so they can operate with fewer regulations at the beginning.
Oh, wow, that's a cool idea.
It's about recognizing that, sometimes you need to take a bit of a risk to get innovation going.
Right, I get it. So they're not just focused on preventing bad things from happening. They're actually looking for ways to encourage growth, even if it means pushing the boundaries a little.
Exactly. They want to see the UK economy thrive.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this gets to another big theme that we see, right?
Yeah.
This need to get more money flowing into these, these real investments.
Right.
And they're looking at this from both sides. Right.
Both sides.
Yeah, on one hand, making it easier for those big investors.
Like pension funds?
Yeah, pension funds to invest in things like infrastructure and new technologies.
Right.
But they
Exciting.
also want to help regular people, everyday folks,
Yeah.
to move their savings out of just cash.
Yeah. Get them invested in things that could actually grow,
Exactly.
things that could, give them a better return and also support UK businesses.
Yeah, so it's like they're trying to make sure the whole financial system is actually doing something useful, right?
Yeah, they want to see that money working, not just sitting there.
Exactly. This sounds like a pretty big shift in how we think about things, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a big one. It's about moving away from just protecting consumers from harm
Right.
to actively creating a financial system that helps the economy grow over the long term.
Wow. Okay, so big picture stuff.
Yeah, and it's not easy,
Right.
The FCA is facing pressure from all sides, the government, consumers, financial firms.
Yeah, sounds tough.
They all want different things.
They all want their piece of the pie.
Exactly. Finding that balance, it's a real challenge.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenges, there's the whole question of the FCA itself
Oh, right.
and whether they've got the right people,
Yeah.
the right expertise to actually make all this happen.
It's a good question.
There have been some worries about staffing, right?
Yeah, especially with all these new demands and how quickly the financial industry is changing.
It's moving so fast.
It really is.
So how can they make sure they have the right people to keep up with all this?
Yeah, it's tough, especially since they can't just throw money at the problem, right?
They can't just buy the best people.
It's not that simple. They've said they need to get better at things like data analytics, cybersecurity, and fintech.
All the buzzwords.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not just about hiring new people. It's about training the people they already have.
Right. Upskilling.
Exactly, and creating a culture where everyone is constantly learning and growing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like they're facing a real uphill battle here.
They are, but it's also a huge opportunity.
How so?
They have a chance to really change how financial regulation works in the UK,
Wow.
and maybe even set an example for other countries to follow.
Yeah, that's a great point.
They're really walking a tightrope here, trying to balance all these competing demands.
Right.
And adapt to this constantly changing landscape.
It's a lot.
It really is.
But it will be interesting to see if they can pull it off.
Absolutely. The stakes are high for the UK economy and for how financial regulation works all over the world.
And for you, the listener, this means you got to understand these changes
Yeah.
and be ready for how they might affect your own financial decisions.
Because this isn't just, some abstract policy debate.
Right.
It's about how the whole financial system is going to work, what opportunities will be out there, and how risks will be managed.
It's about the future of finance, really.
Exactly. A future that works for everyone, hopefully.
Seems like the FCA needs to be even more careful about how they make rules, how they issue guidance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about how this case could impact the whole industry.
Yeah, because it shows how even a small ruling can have huge consequences.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to look at the big picture.
The whole ecosystem.
Right, not just the immediate impact of a rule, but how it interacts with everything else.
All the other regulations, market trends.
Yeah, all of it.
So it's not just about ticking boxes.
No, it's about understanding how things actually work in the real world.
Which is complicated.
Very complicated, yeah.
And unpredictable.
Oh, yeah, and you have to remember that regulations can have unintended consequences.
Like what?
Well, a rule that's meant to protect consumers might accidentally stifle innovation.
Or make things less competitive.
Exactly, and that's where this whole idea of regulation as a growth engine comes in.
Regulation that actually helps businesses thrive.
Right, but it has to be smart regulation.
Not just more regulation or less regulation.
It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot.
Where businesses can grow and consumers are still protected.
Exactly, and that takes a really deep understanding of how markets work.
And how innovation happens.
Yeah, and it's constantly changing, so the FCA needs to be able to adapt.
It's a tough job.
It really is, but it's so important for the UK to be competitive, to be a place where financial services can flourish.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about the potential impact of this case, the need for more thorough analysis, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But how does all this connect back to the FCA's big vision?
Their vision for a more competitive UK?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, one of their big priorities is promoting real investment, remember?
Right. The kind that actually grows the economy.
Exactly. They want to see capital flowing into things that create jobs, boost productivity, that kind of thing.
But as we said, investment can mean different things to different people.
It's a slippery word.
How does the FCA decide what counts as real investment?
Well, they're looking for investments that create new things.
New assets, new companies.
Yeah, new opportunities. Think about funding for startups, infrastructure projects, research and development.
Things that actually expand the economy.
Right, not just buying up existing stuff.
It's got to be something new and valuable.
Exactly. And they're exploring different ways to encourage this.
Like what?
Well, they're looking at making it easier for pension funds to invest in these areas.
Oh, interesting.
And they've even talked about relaxing some rules for startups.
To give them more freedom?
Yeah, more space to innovate and grow.
But doesn't that mean more risk?
There's always a trade-off, between innovation and consumer protection.
Yeah, of course.
But the FCA seems to be trying to find that sweet spot.
Where you can have innovation without too much risk.
Exactly. And that's a tough balance to strike.
It's a constant juggling act.
It really is. As new technologies come along, new business models,
The FCA has to keep up.
they have to adapt, make sure the UK stays competitive.
Which brings us back to that staffing issue.
Yeah, can they really do all this if they don't have the right people?
If they can't attract the best talent.
It's a big question mark. They need people who understand both traditional finance and all this new stuff.
Data science, cybersecurity.
All of it.
It's a lot to ask.
It is, and they're competing with those big private sector firms with deep pockets.
So how do they do it?
Well, they're trying to recruit from those sectors, highlight the opportunity to make a difference.
So it's not just about the money.
It's about attracting people who are passionate about public service.
People who want to make a positive impact.
Exactly, but they also need to create a work environment that's, stimulating and rewarding.
Even if they can't offer those big salaries.
Right, and that's not easy.
It's a real challenge. They're at a critical point, it seems.
They are. They've got this ambitious vision, but they need the right people to make it happen.
And they need the public to trust them.
Oh, that's huge, yeah. If people lose faith in the FCA, that undermines everything.
It's all built on trust.
Exactly. So while they're focused on competition and innovation, they also have to show that they're protecting consumers, maintaining the integrity of the system.
It's that balancing act again.
Always balancing, yeah. It's complex, and it's constantly evolving.
A lot for listeners to think about. It is a lot. So, big picture.
Okay.
What does all this mean for, the average person? Someone trying to figure out their finances.
Well, I think the main thing is that things are changing. The FCA is, they're not just waiting for problems to happen anymore. They're trying to actively shape the financial system.
Make it more dynamic.
Yeah, more competitive. And that could mean new opportunities, but also, potentially new risks.
So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about understanding this bigger shift, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like how the FCA is changing its approach.
Right.
And how that might affect your own decisions or your own money.
Okay, so give me an example, with investing.
Okay, so let's say the FCA is successful in, pushing those big pension funds towards those investments we talked about, infrastructure, startups, things like that.
Right, real investment.
Right, that could change how risky those investments are, how much money people make from them.
And maybe it means those investors become available to regular people too, right?
Potentially, yeah.
If those markets get bigger and easier to trade.
Exactly. And on the other hand, if the FCA loosens the rules for startups...
To let them innovate?
Right, well, that might mean investors need to be more careful, do more research.
Make sure they understand the risks.
Exactly. It's like you need a whole new level of financial literacy now.
And hopefully this deep dive has helped you understand these big issues a little better.